One of the major changes that occurs during the transition to extrauterine life is the transition from fetal to postnatal circulation. So first, let's go over the key characteristics of fetal circulation. So we'll start with the fetus over here. So the first characteristic is going to be the location of gas exchange. So during fetal life, gas exchange is going to be performed in the placenta. Next, number 2 is going to be the presence of cardiac shunts. This will allow us to bypass the lungs and send oxygenated blood throughout the body. So these shunts, there are going to be 3 of them. The first one is going to be the ductus venosus, which we are going to abbreviate from now on as DV. Next is going to be the foramen ovale, which we will abbreviate FO. And then last but not least is going to be the ductus arteriosus. We will go over these more later on. We're going to abbreviate this one DA. Next is going to be vascular resistance. In the fetus, we are going to have a high pulmonary vascular resistance, which we are going to abbreviate PVR, because we are bypassing those lungs because the lungs don't need as much blood during fetal life. So we're going to have a high PVR there, which is going to create a high pressure in the right side of the heart and create shunting, the direction of shunting across the cardiac shunts as right to left. And we're going to have a low systemic vascular resistance because of the low resistance of the placenta. So SVR is going to be systemic vascular resistance. And then lastly, we're going to have ventricle dominance. So the right ventricle is going to pump slightly more than the left ventricle in fetal life. So we are going to be right ventricle dominant. Okay, let's draw it out down here. So first I'm going to start with the structures. So of course we have that placenta, which is the mainstay of fetal circulation. It's where gas exchange is performed. We're going to draw the liver over here. Don't worry, I'm going to label these. We will draw the heart as a box up here. And we will just label each of the chambers. So right atrium, left atrium, ventricle, left ventricle. We're going to draw the brain up here. And then we will draw some lungs over here. Lungs. So first we're going to start off with the most oxygenated blood. So that's going to come out of the umbilical vein, out of the placenta. And we're going to draw it first going over here to the liver. We will label this the umbilical vein. And then we're going to encounter our first shunt, which is going to be the ductus venosus, which is going to connect the umbilical vein to the inferior vena cava. And it's going to shunt blood into that inferior vena cava, and then it's going to come up and empty into the right atrium. We will label this inferior vena cava. Next, we're going to encounter our next shunt, which is going to be the foramen ovale, which connects the right atrium and the left atrium. And I will put the abbreviation FO. And like I said before, vascular resistance in the fetus is going to be high pulmonary vascular resistance, which is going to create increased pressure on the right side of the heart. So we're going to have right to left shunting through our shunts. So the oxygenated blood is going to preferentially go through the foramen ovale into the left atrium. It will then go down into the left ventricle and out through the aorta. And we're going to split up the ascending and descending aorta here. So first, the ascending aorta is going to bring the most oxygenated blood to the brain. So we will label this this real quick as the ascending aorta. And then we're going to have the descending aorta come down this way, and we're going to stop it right there for now. And I will label this descending aorta. Alright, so that's the path of the most oxygenated blood in the fetal system. So next, let's talk about deoxygenated blood. So we're going to have deoxygenated blood coming from the superior vena cava, coming from the upper body, and draining into the right atrium. So there is some mixing going on there. This blood is then going to go down through the right ventricle, and it's going to come out of the pulmonary artery into the lungs. I'll label this real quick as the pulmonary artery. And then we're going to encounter our last shunt here that connects the pulmonary artery and the descending aorta. Is going to be the ductus arteriosus, so it's going to connect them right here. And right now we have right to left shunting. So I'll label this as DA. So blood is going to be shunted from the pulmonary artery to the descending aorta. And from this point on, I will draw deoxygenated blood going back to the placenta to be reoxygenated, and we have the umbilical arteries there. Umbilical arteries. And then I'm going to finish out this lung, so the venous system of the lungs, pulmonary veins, are going to drain back into that left atrium. Pulmonary veins. And so that's it for our fetal circulation. And then next we have the transition, so we have to get to the next phase of extrauterine life. So that begins, so we'll draw a transition. And this is going to begin at the umbilical cord ligation. So once we ligate that umbilical cord, so I'll draw a little umbilical cord for you here. We have our vein there. So once we clamp this umbilical cord, we have begun our transition to postnatal circulation. At this point, the lungs are also hopefully getting some air into them, some aeration, which is then going to majorly transition the area of gas exchange from the placenta to the lungs. So let's draw our neonatal characteristics over here. First, again, we'll start with location of gas exchange. So now it's going to be performed in the lungs. Now we're going to have functional closure of cardiac shunts. That's going to be mainly the ductus venosus. Since now we eliminated that placental circulation, we don't need that to shunt blood from the umbilical vein to the inferior vena cava anymore, so that's going to be functionally gone. And then the foramen ovale is going to also be functionally closed, which I will show you later on. Next, we're going to have a switch in vascular resistance. So now that the lungs are performing gas exchange, they're empty of fluid, they're now aerated, we are going to have a switch to decreased PVR, or pulmonary vascular resistance. And now that the systemic vascular resistance has all of the blood from the placenta, we're going to have an increased systemic vascular resistance. And now this is going to create more pressure in the left side of the heart versus the right side. So now we will have left to right shunting. Left to right shunting at our shunts that do remain open for a period of time. And then last, our ventricle dominance is going to switch. And now that left ventricle is going to be pumping out all of the blood to the body. So now it is functioning more than that right ventricle. So now we have a left ventricle dominant system. Alright, let's draw it out. So now we don't need to draw the placenta because that was eliminated after we ligated the umbilical cord. So we're just going to draw the structures. So we just need the heart. We have the right atrium, left atrium. And then I'm going to draw the lungs again over here. And we will draw the brain up here. So now that inferior vena cava is going to come up and bring deoxygenated blood now into the right atrium from the body. So blood's coming from the body. Now that foraminal valley we talked about earlier is now going to be functionally closed since the pressure changes in the heart. So now that we have that left to right shunting, there is a flap that goes into the left atrium that will close over the foraminal valley, functionally closing. So deoxygenated blood will then run from the right atrium to the right ventricle and out through the pulmonary artery to the lungs, where now gas exchange is being performed. The blood is going to be oxygenated there, and it's going to come back through the pulmonary venous system into the left atrium, down into the left ventricle. We're going to come out through the aorta, and again we will split it up into the ascending aorta. It's going to the brain. And then we're going to have the descending aorta come down here again, and we'll stop it right there. Right, and then we're going to, so the ductus arteriosus, that last shunt we come across, it can still stay patent for hours or even days after birth, depending on gestation of the infant and other factors. But now, since we have more pressure on that left side of the heart, we're going to have left to right shunting, so it's going to shunt oxygenated blood from the aorta into the pulmonary artery. So we still deliver oxygenated blood to the body. And then we'll finish out the superior vena cava up here, which drains the oxygenated blood to that right atrium. And then that's our neonatal circulation.